Thank you, Jen, and thanks for all of you being here today. As you know, nearly a year ago, about half the rain southern Alberta normally has in an entire year fell in the course of 48 hours. Everything's okay? The floods that followed tragically claimed the lives of 4 people and forced the evacuations of more than 100,000 others. And before it was over, a state of emergency had been called in 27 communities, and more damage had been caused than in any other disaster in Canadian history. In a few moments, you'll hear how the Red Cross has responded and continues to respond to these floods. But first, I want to take a moment to provide a bit of context about the work of the Canadian Red Cross. The Canadian Red Cross is part of the largest humanitarian organization in the world, and each year around the globe, Red Cross responds to thousands of disasters. Some give plenty of warning, while others don't. And they come in all shapes and sizes, and with a host of variables that make each a unique and complex challenge. And while Red Cross is well known for its international crisis work, I still find many people today are unaware that we also respond to disasters every day here in Canada. Last year alone, we responded to 2,800 of them, ranging from house fires to national emergencies, including the train derailment and fire in Lac Mégantic, the ice storm in Ontario and Quebec, and of course, the southern Alberta floods. Whenever and wherever a disaster strikes in Canada, the Red Cross is there. And we're there because of the strength and commitment of more than 6,000 highly trained disaster management volunteers. And the generosity of our donors. They are the Red Cross, and they make a world of difference. I would like now to ask Sue Phillips to come forward to discuss what guided Red Cross in its response in the Alberta floods. Sue is the Director General for the Red Cross in Western Canada. She's based here in Calgary and has worked in this response since its beginning.
Thanks, Conrad. After any disaster, it can be hard to find silver linings, but anyone who was here last summer knows that the outpouring of community support was really something special. I think it's safe to say that the flood reminded us all of how important we are to one another. As soon as it was safe to do so, thousands of Albertans descended on affected areas. Many went door to door, shovel in hand, asking if they could help. Some opened their homes to families they had never met before. Others prepared and delivered meals for cleanup crews. Through it all, many turned to Red Cross to translate their care and concern into meaningful help. And that's a responsibility we take very seriously. In a moment, Byrne will review Red Cross recovery operations. But before that, I also want to acknowledge the volunteers who made our work here possible. Because in the end, Red Cross is not a symbol or an institution or a building. It's where everyday people come together to help others when they need it most. People like Dixie Fenwick, who is here today, has been a volunteer with Red Cross for 24 years and has been working on the Alberta floods since the beginning of the disaster. Dixie, do you want to stand up, please? Thank you. That's great. Thanks, Dixie. Through this response, more than 1,000 people like Dixie became part of one of the largest Red Cross contingents of volunteers ever to work on a disaster in Canada. Some managed emergency shelters, others registered evacuees, served food, delivered cleanup supplies, or simply provided a shoulder to lean on. That says a lot about the level of care and concern in the community, and it speaks to the enduring capacity that has been built here in Canada. Many others chose to help by making financial donations, and their generosity was also overwhelming. Corporations, foundations, service clubs, families, and individuals have combined to make more than $42 million available for help through Red Cross. Interestingly, more than 40% of that came from outside of Alberta, including about $650,000 in donations through the American Red Cross. All of the monies raised are held in a trust account, with the interest earned going back into that fund. As Conrad noted, 2013 was a busy year for the Canadian Red Cross, And while some of the disasters he mentioned have slowly started to slip from the headlines, believe me, they remain front and center for those affected and for those who are working to help. No matter the disaster for Red Cross, these things remain the same. We address needs, not loss. We seek to increase the capacity of communities to face future disasters. The amount of help provided varies depending on the composition and capacity of families, their access to insurance and government assistance, and our financial abilities. And the help continues until basic needs have been met or can be addressed because families have regained their capacity or can access help through other sources. In delivering help, Red Cross is committed to working closely with governments and other agencies to ensure coordination and avoid duplication. Where possible and practical, we purchase relief goods and supplies in those communities affected by the disaster so as to stimulate the economy and encourage the return to a normal state. We also advocate for change that would benefit those affected by the disaster or improve the efficiency of the response. And finally, we seek to not inadvertently do more harm. Disasters affect people in different ways, at different times, and for different durations. And that has certainly been the case here in Alberta. For some time, the floods were an inconvenience, and other than needing help with cleanup, lives returned relatively quickly to normal. For others, the floods changed their lives. Some we are helping lost their home, their livelihood, or have had their health compromised. Others have limited capacity to begin with and are struggling to cope with new expenses caused by the flood. Others still are in a holding pattern for a variety of reasons and living in temporary arrangements while awaiting information they need to make important decisions. And most recently, we are beginning to see another type of client come forward. People who have never before sought help, but now have exhausted their own resources. We are concerned for those who might still be out there struggling and either unaware of help that's available or too proud or embarrassed to reach out. To address that, we have made an extra effort to reach flood-affected individuals through mailings, community advertisements, and door-to-door visits. We want them to know we're here and that our help can be accessed confidentially through any of our offices or by calling our toll-free number for Alberta flood recovery. That number is 1-866-696-6484. We also want them to know that if they have already received Red Cross help but are still struggling, it's okay to come and see us again. We hope those messages get out again today. With that, I will ask John Byrne to come forward to discuss the particulars of the Alberta flood response. As Jen noted, John is the Director General for Disaster Management at the Canadian Red Cross. In that capacity, he provides leadership and guidance for all disaster-related programs in Canada. John has overseen the Society's response to many difficult events, including the crash of Swiss Air 111 in 1998 and the Southeast Asia tsunami in 2004. He continues to lead the Red Cross response to two other Canadian catastrophes in 2013, the trail derailment in Lac-Mégantic and the ice storms in eastern Canada. John.
Conrad, Sue, special guests, the media. It's a pleasure in one respect to be here. About a year ago we were here talking about the operation. We're here today to tell you how successful that operation has been almost 1 year later. As Sue mentioned earlier in her comments, Red Cross was very fortunate to have the support of Canadians in this disaster, as we do for most disasters, and raised $42 million. The Red Cross takes this very seriously. This stewardship of this money of donors is taken seriously, and for that I would like to point out to you, every dollar donated to the Red Cross for this disaster has been spent on this disaster. And as Sue mentioned, has been separated in other trust funds kept for this disaster to respond to the needs of the people in this province. 95 cents of every dollar donated goes directly to impacted families and individuals and communities. And just so that we're clear, any other operational costs for the Canadian Red Cross are borne by other funding other than this event. The Red Cross takes a holistic approach to disasters and approaches them in 3 phases. The very first phase, of course, is emergency and early recovery. Many of you would recall last year during the immediacy of response, this is what we refer to as our relief phase. Recovery will be the second phase, and of course our third will be the long-term development phase. Within each of these phases, our work in our key 4 areas continues. Our first, we look at it and say, what assistance is required to individuals and families? Second, of course, is shelter and home cleanup, repair and rehabilitation. The third being community initiatives and support to small businesses. And fourth, community resiliency and disaster preparedness. The very first area of focus that we talked about in terms of assistance to individuals and families is the one that generates the images we all tend to relate to. It's characterized by activities focused on preserving life, property, people being evacuated, moving into temporary shelter, or receiving necessities such as water and food. For Red Cross, it is a period in which the emphasis is on providing those who are unable to meet their basic needs. And in Alberta, those needs were certainly substantial. So far, Red Cross has expended $21 million for assistance to individuals and families. This, of course, includes distributing in the early days nearly 1 million relief supplies, including cleanup kits, first aid kits, water, towels, cots, and blankets. We also delivered assistance through our operating a toll-free number for the Red Cross. We had call centers set up in Atlantic Canada and here in the west end of the country. We fielded over 55,000 requests and were able to reunite families. We managed or supported 16 emergency shelters and reception centers. We have provided financial support to replenish the supplies of 8 food banks, which were overwhelmed in the early days. We have provided individuals and families with cash supplements for food, clothing, medical equipment, child care, household goods, rent or mortgage payments as required, utility bills, transportation, and occupational items to help return people to work. In addition, through the collaboration with Alberta Health Services and Alberta Mental Health Services, Red Cross personnel has provided emotional support, a place where those affected could safely share their stories and allow the emotion. Red Cross personnel helped many manage stress and develop coping skills to assist with the return to some level of normality. When appropriate, Red Cross staff connected individuals with health professionals. Altogether, through this initial emergency and recovery phase, the Red Cross provided assistance to over 70,000 Albertans. Our second phase of focus is shelter and home cleanup, repair and rehabilitation. In addressing this during the Alberta floods, we consulted heavily with those affected by the floods and collaborated extensively with community groups, municipalities, and First Nations, the provincial government and non-government organizations, as well as organizations with expertise in cleanup, repair, and rehabilitation of homes. Our assistance to date has included providing Samaritan's Purse with a grant for cleanup services to over 400 homes in Calgary, High River, and Siksika Nation. Providing Habitat for Humanity, Mennonite Disaster Services, Samaritan's Purse, and World Renew, with funding to repair and rehabilitate another 210 homes in the High River area. And contributing to the funding of up to 25 homes in the High River area under the Home Ownership Program, an initiative to be administered by Habitat for Humanity that will provide new, affordable, housing for years to come. Other activity to support shelter and home cleanup and repair has included collaboration with various municipalities and the provincial government to assist many homeowners with costs incurred with permits, prevention items, utility bills, furnaces, and hot water tanks. Red Cross has worked and continues to work with the Stoney Nakoda First Nation and Siksika Nation to identify and address their unique flood-related challenges related to housing. In this endeavor, Red Cross has expended $5 million on support and initiatives to assist families and individuals in their homes. Our third area of focus is on community initiatives and support to small business. Experience in this area tells us it is critical to the full recovery of communities affected by disaster. An estimated 1,500 businesses were affected by the southern Alberta flood. More than half of those were located in the High River, where 76 have indicated they are closing their doors for good as a result of the disaster. Some of these businesses are essential to their communities, providing local employment and producing income to its owners. In response, the Red Cross is offering grants to small business owners experiencing financial hardship caused by the flood. To spur initiatives that encourage community development, the Red Cross has also introduced grant opportunities for individuals and groups that are planning projects or events intended to rejuvenate the spirit and vibrancy of their communities. Altogether, Red Cross has spent in excess of $8.6 million for community initiatives and support to small business. Our fourth and final area is focused on community resiliency and disaster preparedness. And for this, we expect to expend $2.6 million over the next 2 years. This work is aimed at replenishing services that help communities and residents to help themselves and each other. It also supports new projects that improve the preparedness of families and communities to face yet another disaster. Work in this area is in the early stages, but discussion with partner agencies, community groups, and government officials have already identified opportunities to increase our community resiliency. Our continuing community outreach and constant interaction with flood-affected individuals is also expected to generate initiatives to strengthen the resilience and preparedness of the affected communities. We have provided in your kit a summary of the Red Cross commitments and expenditures to date, which will be available, as I say, through your kit. Next slide. The Red Cross has now expended $27.5 million in Alberta flood relief. This represents roughly 65% of the funds raised. At this point, we are anticipating that recovery work will continue for at least another 2 years. I would say that we will still have sufficient funds to make a very meaningful contribution in all 4 of the areas that comprise our successful response. No matter how many times we have done this, the Red Cross approaches every disaster as an opportunity to evaluate and to learn. One of the ways we learn is through a survey, and we conducted this survey with the assistance of our American Red Cross friends. I'm pleased to report that the Alberta floods, the survey told us nearly 94% of the beneficiaries believe that the Red Cross services they received were appropriate to their needs at the time. 96% of the presence of the Red Cross in their neighborhood was reassuring. And nearly 93% said the Red Cross gave them hope when there was little. In closing, I would like to take this opportunity to acknowledge the Calgary and Area United Way, the Calgary Foundation, other charitable organizations and agencies, task forces, foundations, governments at all levels that have worked on this terrific response. In my many years in this role, I have seldom seen the level of cooperation and collaboration that we've had here. The efficiencies and the working together have translated into more help to more people that were in need. I'd also like to acknowledge our corporate donors. In particular, the Calgary Stampede, Shaw Communications, and the Flames Foundation for Life, all of whom donated in excess of $1 million to this cause. And finally, I would like to thank the many thousands of ongoing individual Red Cross supporters who make monthly contributions to the Red Cross to ensure that the core staff and expertise to respond effectively to disasters anytime and anywhere required. Today, I hope all of the volunteers and the staff, our funders, will see the difference they have made and continue to make in the lives of the people here affected by the southern Alberta flood. Thank you very much.